to the dark side. I wanna be your left-hand man. I love you when you're singing that song, and I got a lump in my throat 'cause you're gonna sing the words wrong. Is this movie that I think you like? This guy decides to quit his job and head to New York City.
Welcome back to our daily show on this Tuesday morning. Dr. Isha McConkey.
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
You got it.
We just were talking about if I was going to botch this or not. Normally it's an interview, you know?
Exactly.
It's National Women's Health Week, and it's always great to talk with our friends at OSF Healthcare. And really, thank you for joining me this Tuesday morning.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And Randy, working hard as well, going to go bring us some some cups because we don't need any dolphin sounds.
Yeah, my straw sometimes does that.
Well, really, thanks for joining us, and thanks for talking about this important topic. And, you know, let's just kind of dive right into this because when we're talking about the changes of life and those periods for women, it's something that I will never, go through, but something I think that we all need to understand because it does, play a role on, number one, the women in our lives, the women in our life, and then two, the people around, that woman too. So how can menopause affect a woman's mood or mental health?
Oh, goodness. So menopause definitely affects women's moods and mental health. And so it affects all of us, mainly because I don't think a lot of people realize that your hormones, estrogen and progesterone, affect neurotransmitters.
Oh.
I know, right? I know. Yeah. So estrogen actually affects norepinephrine, acetylcholine, serotonin, and dopamine. Mm-hmm. So anytime your estrogen and progesterone are affected, you're going to affect serotonin. Serotonin is the neurotransmitter. We all know about that one, right?
Right.
It affects your happiness. It's going to make you feel irritable when it goes low. It's going to affect anxiety. It's going to affect depression. And so you may not get full-blown clinical depression or anxiety, but if your estrogen is not stable, neither is your mood.
Right. Well, and it totally makes sense. And, is that kind of why, women normally feel more anxious or sad during those, kind of periods or even those, premenopausal periods too?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you think about it, if every morning when you wake up, you're not going to have a stable hormone, you're not going to have stable serotonin. So what's interesting is even giving a woman in menopause an SSRI, which is a common medication that we give people who have serotonin problems, that won't work in menopause.
Really?
Because the problem is not consistently low serotonin. The problem is estrogen fluctuations. So it's also serotonin fluctuations. So it's like every morning you wake up and you don't know who you're going to be.
Well, and it makes sense. And honestly, it's one of those too where I can see it being pretty difficult to manage that way. And whenever you're in your role at OSF Healthcare, what are your, kind of steps? What does that kind of look like in those initial conversations and then that, that ongoing kind of care plan?
That's a great question. So when I initially meet a woman and we're having that initial conversation, it's going to be getting a symptom list. So the first thing is, what are we even looking at? So a lot of times I'll have women bring in lists. A lot of people hate that. They're like, I don't want to bring a list to my doctor. I actually encourage it because in these cases, there are so many things going on. Is it a mental health issue? Is it just depression? Is it just anxiety? Is it menopause? Is it perimenopause? And so the diagnosis is really important because if it's depression or anxiety, then they're going to respond really well to an SSRI like Prozac, like Zoloft. But if it's not, as we discussed, that'll make it worse.
Right.
Whereas if it is menopause or perimenopause, then something like hormone replacement therapy is going to really benefit them.
That's really interesting. And, whenever you're having these conversations, when do they start for most women?
The conversation,
like the age range. Whenever your patients come in, what does that normally look like? Is it 30s? Is it 40s? What? Because I'm kind of curious about that too.
Well, that's a great question, and I think the problem is I don't want women to start thinking about that. I want them to just tell me everything all the time because it can be any age. And so there's a lot of times where you can get really premature menopause.
Really?
And so I don't want them to think, oh, it couldn't possibly be that, and then suffer in silence.
And then they don't say anything.
Correct.
And that makes sense.
So I think what I would like is for women to just trust themselves and trust their bodies and bring all of their concerns to their doctor and kind of let us tease that out. So a lot of the education actually needs to be to physicians as well. I think there's a big lacking of mental health and menopause education to physicians. So it wasn't even until the early 2000s where women were even studied in menopause really extensively. So a lot of physicians lack training. And so that's one of the things that we're up against, is trying to really educate physicians in this. So when a woman in her early 30s, for example, comes to a physician with mental health complaints, so irritability, anxiety, depression, it can be difficult to tease out, is this premature menopause or is it just anxiety?
Well, and that makes sense. And it's interesting to hear the almost detective, side of things that you have to do. And it seems like, honestly, that communication and really that transparency is almost vital when you're having that conversation. Yeah,
because I think a really trained and educated physician who can be a good listener can really tease that out.
Oh, for sure.
It just takes time.
And, are there any emotional changes that people might not expect, when it comes to menopause?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes. So there are a lot of unexpected emotional changes. So we already discussed the expected ones.
Right.
We all know that when you're going through the change, you're going to be irritable. That we know about the anger. We know about the anxiety. I think one of the things that we kind of touched on it, imagine if every morning you wake up, you don't really know who you're going to be, right? Because you have that, your hormones are fluctuating. So you don't have that stable serotonin. So you don't exactly know how your personality is going to be. Because a lot of times we don't realize our neurotransmitters are stable through most of our life for most people. And so when your hormones are suddenly shifting, you're experiencing things you haven't experienced since puberty.
Wow.
Seriously, even pregnancy is not quite the same.
Really?
Correct. And also pregnancy is expected.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. And you're making a baby. Your belly is growing. Your body has these obvious visual signs. Perimenopause, you're still having periods. So, you're not expecting these things. You don't really understand what's going on. So you're waking up. You don't know who you are. The biggest unexpected thing I've observed is a lack of confidence.
That makes sense.
And this kind of, you don't really know who you are, but everybody around you expects you to be the same person.
Well, and I can see that being really I was going to go kind of right into that because of this, the mental toll that would kind of bring on top of, everything else you're experiencing, which is already, terrible because you don't know who you are. And I mean, really is, because you don't know who you are in the morning. It could be different depending on the day or even, the hour or moment, I'm sure, just depending on what situations come up and arise throughout the day.
Yeah.
And then if, you're somebody like most people, you feel bad about maybe getting a little bit upset or you don't know what's going on. And then it makes it 10 times worse.
Correct. Well, and that brings me to the next point. One of the things that's really interesting is in America, I feel like menopause has a huge shame component. So a lot of women, we don't talk about menopause. It seems to have a bit of you're supposed to go through it with strength. You're supposed to go through it with, no one else should really know you're experiencing it. You should go through it kind of smoothly. In other cultures, it's a celebrated thing. So even like in our culture with puberty, we kind of pass tampons real quietly, we don't talk about it. In other cultures, they celebrate it, kind of like the quinceanera, in our cultures, we keep these things quiet. So one of the things I would love to change if we could all possible, make it like a celebration. So even like when you hit puberty, like celebrate becoming a woman, make it something that's not a shameful, quiet thing. And then the same thing here, celebrate, you no longer have to have birth control. You no longer have to, quietly pass tampons.
Right.
And also there's a stability. Once you're on the other end of this, your hormones don't change again. And the beauty of that stability, waking up every day with the same neurotransmitters, the same hormones on the other end for the rest of your life.
Well, and honestly, it's one of those things too, where the more you talk about it and normalize it, because you're right, it can't really be one of those things where you're shameful of it, or it's just this kind of that elephant in the room, because it's one of those things where I feel like that causes more problems than it would, create them in a way. Because if we educate ourselves and really just talk about it, I think it kind of just helps everybody, no matter if it's anybody involved in that situation too.
Absolutely. I think there's one of the other things too that I actually learned recently, which was surprising because I've studied this for years. One of the neurotransmitters that is also affected is acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is one that's a cognitive neurotransmitter.
That's interesting.
So it's one that's affected processing. So how quickly we can process things and how well we can remember things. So the whole, it can almost mimic ADHD symptoms. So temporarily in perimenopause, some women, when their progesterone and estrogen kind of fluctuate, their acetylcholine levels can change. And they can also have ADHD symptoms temporarily. So some women, their whole lives, all of a sudden when they hit perimenopause, think they have ADHD. And so
Gotcha.
a really good physician can kind of tailor that to, no, really, you just need a little bit of hormone replacement therapy and you don't have ADHD. And so I think that's really fascinating.
That really is. And is there anything that, I mean, because you said you couldn't really give those SSRs, is that what they were called?
SSRIs.
Yeah. For people that are going through, or women that are going through menopause because of the hormone changes, is there anything that women do or can do to help balance, their moods throughout the day in a healthy way? Because I could only imagine, like you said, if you start taking, those type of things with rapid changes like that, you could cause some really significant issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a really well-trained physician can do hormone replacement therapy effectively.
You think so?
So in perimenopause, you need to have progesterone to protect the uterus because you still are having periods. But then once you hit full-on menopause, you only need estrogen therapy. But you have to talk to a physician or a well-trained practitioner because there are some contraindications to hormone therapy. But most women, it's very safe and
Really
it's
interesting.
really helpful.
Has hormone replacement therapy been around for quite some time?
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting. See, I don't know much about that. And what's that process look like?
It's different for every woman. And so that's really something you need to find the right doctor or the right practitioner to talk to about.
That's really interesting. Do you have a moment to take a quick break with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll come back with more of this great conversation. You stay there. We'll stay here in the studio on RiverBender.com and Roku TV.
Carden Circus is coming to town. It's fun for the whole family. Don't miss out. Get ready for breathtaking aerial stunts and a heart-pounding thrill ride that will have you on the edge of your seat. 2 nights only. See the magic in Jerseyville on May 27th and Highland on May 29th. Bring the whole family and experience the wonder of Carden Circus. Get your tickets now at glowcircus.com.
Oh no, another bad headache?
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to see your doctor.
OSF Healthcare can handle all of your family's primary care needs, including diagnosing health issues or referring you to a specialist. Schedule an appointment today.
For the biggest selection of pre-owned cars, trucks, and SUVs in the Riverbend, visit AltonToyota.com or stop at their location on the Homer Adams Parkway in Alton. Winner of the prestigious President's Award, Munganast Burkhardt Alton Toyota knows how to treat their customers, and they will help you find the vehicle that is perfect for you. For years, Munganast Toyota has been a fixture in the Riverbend, and now Munganast Burkhardt carries the tradition. New name, but the same great service you've come to expect.
Yo, what up? It's Mike Keith, the proud graduate of Lewis and Clark Community College. I got my start in broadcasting and now I work all over the country. I discovered my path in media, but I could have been an electrician. Or I could have been a nurse.
Maybe not.
Life's better when you're under the American Family Insurance roof because they know your house is home base for their dreams. Whether it's a kid like me aiming for the big leagues, ready, future rocket scientist, or a budding prima ballerina. When you feel totally protected, your family's free to pursue their dreams. Which is good.
Let's go.
American Family Insurance.
With over 20 years of experience, Wilson's Tree Service has the expertise to handle all of your tree care needs. Licensed and fully insured, their team of experts are dedicated to providing reliable service. Plus, with a 24-hour emergency service line, Wilson's will always be there for you. Don't risk tackling that timber by yourself. Trust the local professionals at Wilson's Tree Service. Visit treeservicealtonil.org to get started today.
You're listening to Our Daily Show with CJ Nasello on RiverBender.com.
Welcome back to Our Daily Show, 9:29. A little bit of change. on that 9:20. That means some seconds. I just don't know how many seconds there are, you know. Back with our conversation with OSF Healthcare and Dr. Isha McConkey. Oh, did I do it?
You did. Well done.
Look at this. I'm proud of myself.
You should be.
You know, and it's really great to have this conversation, though, because menopause, especially if, you know, we have a family, it could affect, you know, everyone's aspect in that role, too, because, you know, stressful moms or, that stressful, you know, wife or partner or significant other, whatever that role is, I mean, it could play a toll on that dynamic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So one of the things, I think the question in your statement there would be, how can the family support someone going through this? Yeah, and I think it's important because a lot of times when a woman is going through this, you have a partner involved. You also have potentially children going through puberty.
Right.
So I'm picturing a family where you have the mom going through menopause, you have children going through puberty, you have a lot of instability with hormones. You're waking up to a new family most days.
Well, and what are some of the conversations maybe that that family can have, or some of the things that we can do to kind of add some distressors to that dynamic and you know, keep everybody as you know, easy as it can be?
Absolutely. I think one of the best things that works in all situations, not just in this one, is acceptance. I think one of the key things to peace in all families is learning how to accept where everyone is at any moment. So when you wake up and you see that someone is irritable, and when a key thing to remember is acceptance isn't tolerance.
Right.
So acceptance means realizing that someone's being irritable and then having boundaries. So, you know what, I'm going to accept that, you know, my daughter is going through puberty and she didn't talk to me kindly. And then I'm going to say, how do I have a kind boundary? You know, or I'm going to accept that I don't like how my wife talked to me just now, you know, and I'm going to have kindness and say, how can I meet her needs and then have a boundary? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it really makes sense that way.
Yeah.
And it's one of those words, I could see someone going, well, that kind of just seems like common sense, but it's not, because in the flows of life, I mean, how many times do we do that now in our daily lives, you know, already? So to add that and really kind of add that pause and set those, you know, boundaries in a way that's not confrontational is a really healthy thing.
Yes. I think a lot of people think acceptance equals tolerance, and it doesn't have to be.
See, that's a really interesting point, too, because that word tolerance is so much different than acceptance. And it's one of those two words, no matter what, if it's coming to, in terms of how menopause affects the dynamic, or if it comes with any other, mental health or any type of other similar issue. I mean, it's acceptance, but tolerance is really just kind of that line that gets crossed a little bit. And it's like puberty too. And I think that's a big one for a lot of people, more so than anything else, is dealing with children in puberty that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so interesting. You know, I wanted to ask you about sleep, because sleep really does affect everything, you know, and that's something I'm going through right now. And, you know, it's just the way it goes.
My condolences.
I'm not drinking the energy drinks anymore. I'm doing good. And I'm getting over the hump and the hurdle of being tired. I'm finally figuring out how to do this again, you know. But when it comes to sleep and menopause, you know, I can only imagine that plays a really important role on this.
Sleep is massively affected by menopause. So some of it we don't even understand yet. But one of the main neurotransmitters is GABA. So like we were talking about how the hormones affect neurotransmitters. One of the ones we haven't even touched on yet is GABA. Progesterone massively affects that. So for a lot of women, doing some progesterone hormone therapy can really help their sleep. For some women, it doesn't help at all. So a lot of times this is where I actually find supplements to be helpful.
Really? Like what type of supplement?
Yeah, excellent question. So things like valerian root. There is also, black cohosh can be good for hot flashes. Some women find it to be helpful for sleep because hot flashes are one of the things that really interfere with their sleep. Sometimes you'll find magnesium can be really beneficial for sleep. Really important caveat, though, always discuss supplements with your doctor because they can interfere with a lot of other medications you might be on. That's really a good point to make, too. And, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier about, you know, having more open conversations about going through, you know, the change. And, and what are some of the ways that, you know, you kind of talk with your patients or your providers do, too, that kind of help normify this in a way? Because I'm sure that, you know, for some, it could be a whole wide range of emotions that come through your office doors. Absolutely. I think a lot of times I have to actually be the one to bring it up. So I'll have a lot of women, even in their 30s, who come to me suddenly confused. I've gone my whole life. I've never been an anxious person. I've usually been pretty calm or controlled. All of a sudden, I was at work and I had almost a panic attack. I think I'm losing my mind. You know, I don't know what happened. And so I'll start asking more questions and I start finding finding a lot more perimenopausal symptoms. And so I introduced the idea of that. And then I find out, oh, their periods are a little bit more irregular, or they're starting to have these symptoms. And so I can gently say, I don't think you're crazy. Good news.
That's
and you'd be surprised how many tears that brings, though.
Well, I'm sure.
Because a lot of times that's the first thing women think when their whole life they have felt one way. All of a sudden they wake up and they're having all these symptoms like, I'm losing my mind. I'm either having early onset dementia and it's interesting how few women, their first thought is menopause because we don't talk about it, and so it's been a real joy for me to be able to say, hey, you're not crazy. You might feel crazy and you might feel crazy for a few more years, but it will pass. And there are things we can do to help. And
it's really fascinating to hear that because I'm sure, just to finally get an answer to something like that would be such a relief for so many people.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I know that we've been, talking menopause, but kind of a fascinating question because I'm looking here just, kind of the notes. And are there any surprising upsides to menopause?
There are. So we've talked a lot about how scary it is, how frustrating it is, but kind of like how on the other side of puberty, it can be a really beautiful thing to go from being a child to an adult.
Right.
The same thing can happen here. So although your whole life you may have been one person, and there is a beauty to knowing who you are and being able to depend on that, on the other side of this, you're another person. Right. And what I have found in exploring a lot of menopause and how these neurotransmitters change is the stability that you get on the other side is a lot more strong than what you had before. And so a lot of times the flexibility that you see a lot of women have, so that a lot of women in their 20s and 30s can be very agreeable. Mm-hmm. And although we see that as a positive, and I'm not saying it's not, there is something to the truth that a woman can have maybe in her 40s and 50s that can be very freeing for her. So a lot of things that they maybe did in their 20s and 30s, all the sacrifices that they maybe made for a family, for their children, maybe in their 40s and 50s, they can say, you know what? I now have things I want for myself, and not in a selfish way, but just they can start seeing things in a different way. They have a lot of wisdom from their earlier years, and now they have the strength and the fortitude to actually act on that and make decisions that put their needs a little bit ahead.
Well, and it makes sense. And, when you're navigating this or anyone is, what is the most important thing to manage when you feel like you're, losing yourself and you're going through these changes? Is there anything that you can kind of do to balance that? I don't want to lose who I, truly am. And, while I'm going through this change, because that is, kind of scary. I could imagine to go through that journey going, man, I don't know what I am tomorrow or what I am now.
I think this goes back to the acceptance.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I often say in my office is that you can't ever lose yourself. Mm-hmm. And so we are all on a journey every day to creating ourselves. And so the idea of losing yourself is kind of a myth. And so each day you just kind of discover who you are in that moment, who you are today. And each decision we make brings us closer to who we want to be. And so I just think that menopause forces us to really live in that truth.
100%. And, what's one thing if you could, rub a genie lamp and, wish, 3 wishes. Is there anything that you wish, really women knew about, their mental health, before hitting menopause or just mental health in general? Because I'm sure, there's circumstances where maybe our mental health isn't the best and we're going through, maybe we already have anxiety or we have an OCD or we have, something that's already diagnosed and then we're going through a significant, milestone.
Yes, you are not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
There have been many women before you and after you who will feel what you are feeling right now. There is definitely something that can be done to make you feel better. And whatever you're feeling will pass.
Really fascinating. And, before I say goodbye to you for now, is there anything else that we should, know or talk about when it comes to menopause or just, raising awareness to women's health in general?
I think the main thing that I would like our communities to know is that there is a lot of value to our women. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes when we see the emotionality that comes out in women, we think there's less value to that. And we put a lot of value on stoicism. I would just like to see a lot more value put in the beauty of the emotions.
Absolutely.
That's all.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. It was a great conversation,
Yes.
and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No problem. We'll take a quick break. More Daily Show on this Tuesday morning comes right around the corner at 9:40. A little bit of change on RiverBender.com and Roku TV.